Welcome to America's Cannabis Conversation. Heard every Saturday at 4:20 p.m. online at americascannabisconversation.com. Each week, we provide our listeners information, education, and insight into the exploding medical and adult use cannabis industry. You'll hear from industry experts, elected officials, local growers, detractors, and more. Learn how to build your own cannabis business, how to grow the product, what's legal, and where it's legal. Tune in each week to hear the latest industry news and updates from the American Cannabis Industry Association in Washington, tips on investing in cannabis, personal success stories, and more. It's time to join the conversation. And here's your host, Dan Perkins.
This is Dan Perkins with your American Cannabis Conversation. Quick news. Washington, D.C. Several Republican members of the U.S. House of Representatives who previously voted against the Safe Banking Act, which would allow financial institutions to offer cannabis companies financial services without fear of federal reprisals, asked U.S. Senate Banking Committee Chairman Mike Crapo to oppose the measure. SAFE was approved in September by the full House with a vote of 321 to 103. Some industry insiders suggest that there still is a possibility that we may see banking reform out of the Senate. However, they note that Crapo, an Idaho Republican, recently went to the effort of asking for input on the issue and said he would be working on his own version of the bill. The White House. GOP senators press Treasury Secretary for tax credits for marijuana businesses. A Republican senator recently pressed the head of the Treasury Department on whether marijuana businesses qualify for federal tax benefits. During a Senate Finance Committee hearing, Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin was asked about the Opportunity Zone tax credit, which is meant to encourage investment in distressed, low-end communities through the benefits such as deferrals on capital gains taxes. Senator James Langford of Oregon, whose state voters approved a medical marijuana ballot measure in 2018, told Mnuchin that businesses that derive more than 5% of their profits from things like alcohol sales are ineligible for tax credits. But there is not a definition dealing with the cannabis industry. The senator asked, are they within the 5% amount or are they not at all because there's a federal prohibition on cannabis sales? The Treasury Secretary said that he was going to have to get back to the senator. And our final story comes from Iowa City, Iowa, where the University of Iowa is seeking senior patients for a medical cannabis research study. The University of Iowa is planning to conduct a study to find out if cannabis increases the risk of falling for older patients. Might there be a heightened danger for older patients who are using medical marijuana? That's what one professor at the University of Iowa is aiming to find out. Thorsten Rudolph, a professor in the Department of Neurology at the University of Iowa Carver College of Medicine, is currently looking for volunteers between the ages of 50 and 80 to participate in the study, which will examine whether cannabis use creates a greater risk in them following. The study will feature two pools of individuals, those who do use marijuana and those that do not. For Rudolph, it's an opportunity to examine pot use among groups of people who may not be the best equipped to dabble. Dr. Rudolph said that seniors do not know how to use medical cannabis. There are no guidelines, no recommendations out there. We want to find out what is the best and safest product. This has been your American Cannabis Conversation Quick News. One other note, make sure you go to W420radionetwork.com and download your discount coupon for your very own grow tent so you can grow cannabis at home. This has been your America's Cannabis Conversation Quick News. I'm Dan Perkins. Who's going to be on the program today? We're going to start off with Ellis Smith. Ellis Smith is our serial entrepreneur in cannabis who's helping us understand the various facets of the cannabis business from an investment opportunity. And we're going to deal about the challenges about the holy grail, owning your own dispensary. What are the costs? What are the decisions you have to make? And what are the things that you need to avoid, the mistakes you need to avoid doing? In addition, we're going to have Rich Wolkoff, our field special reporter, who have an interview with Brent Johnson on state laws. Brent Johnson is the CEO of Hoban Law, which is among America's largest cannabis law firms. They have partners in virtually every state and can help you with information about setting up a cannabis business, maintaining a cannabis business, dealing with tax and other challenges. In addition to that, we have Alexandre Therrien, who is going to talk to us, continuing the story about point-of-sale software and what other products and services that Lightspeed has for their customers and prospects to make their businesses more profitable. And last, we have Chase Roberts, our radio correspondent at the International Cannabis Business Conference 2020, with an interview of Janice Mackey. Janice is the Information Officer for the State of California Natural Resource Agency, a department of the Fish and Wildlife. She tells us how the state of California is getting involved in the cannabis industry. Oh, by the way, remember W420radionetwork.com and clip on to get your discount coupon on your own grow tent. So let's get on with the conversation. Welcome back to the conversation, and joining us today is one of our regulars, Ellis Smith, who is our cannabis serial entrepreneur. He's going to talk to us today about the opportunities in the cannabis space as we go up our ladder of success, and we're going to look at the Holy Grail. Ellis, welcome to the show. And please tell us about the challenges of opening your own dispensary.
Sure. So as we're kind of climbing this ladder here and we're at this next level, this next rung, in kind of the ability to get into the marketplace, dispensary would be kind of your next line of least resistance to get in. Your capital expenditure to build out one of these facilities is, I've seen guys do them for less than $100,000, and I've seen folks spend up to $1 million. And I think the sweet spot anywhere between could be anywhere from $250,000 to $500,000 to really give you the look, the feel, just everything you want your dispensary to, one, to meet compliance, but two, to represent your brand and your aesthetic and what you want to give for the customer experience.
I apologize for interrupting you, Ellis, but I did want to ask you a question. You talked about how much money could be spent from $100,000 to $1 million, and you used the word image. Is image that important in choosing how you design your dispensary?
You see it all. You've got the little mom and pop, but people don't have a big budget, and they just rented a space that maybe 1,000 square foot, used the same paint that were on the walls in there, and moved in some shelf space and some counter space, put a POS system up and shelving, and they hit the ground running for $100,000. And you see that pretty common. You can imagine like liquor stores. You've got a multitude of spectrum of how liquor store experience can look. Some are high-end, some are very nice. The customer service is over the top, and they've got warehouse walls to walk, aisle after aisle to see all the end product. Same with dispensaries. You see things like Apple stores, and you see things that embrace all types of technology and screens and a customer experience that is, very unique. And so you're kind of seeing it all, and I think this is important from people that want to get into the sector and into the dispensary ownership side is, what kind of customer experience do you want to give when they come in that door? That design, that feel, the finish, the fixtures, the color palette, how all that blends into that flow coming in and out of the door, how you meet with them, the products that you offer, it's a very important component. And I think a lot of people tend to overlook it, but I think it's important to put some emphasis on that so that you can really give the customer what they're looking for so you can get that loyalty to come back. And that's like any retail experience.
If you are looking to spend $250,000 to $500,000 to lay out a store, what do you think is the payback time?
So, most of these people think this is a get-rich-quick scheme. And this is like any other business model. I mean, we're running a 20 to 40% margin. So you can imagine, these things can be minimum a 3-year ROI. And that's pretty good considering most business models don't give you that. So 3 to 5 years, you should be operating fine, no problem, out of debt, ideally putting money in the bank and, living a hunky-dory life. So that's the reality behind this. It's not going to happen in 1 year. Now, has it happened in 1 year? Yes. We have seen these things happen before in the right market. And some people do get that lucky. I've seen it happen in 2 years. I've seen it happen in 4 years. Do you have the capital in place? Was your team organized? Was there a lot of pitfalls as a team to learn from obstacles? Did the regulation mess you up? Was a lot of changes from that aspect? Did you have a hard time getting through working with the city and getting licensed? There's all kind of obstacles that can also cause that delay. It's a lot of variables that people need to understand here.
We did a story on the expansion in Illinois and how it was overwhelming, the limited number of stores that were in place over the Christmas holidays. And I think a couple of stores did like $11 million in sales in a very short period of time. Then we had Ontario province in Canada, which released edibles, and the state-run dispensary, which supplies product to the private dispensaries, virtually they all ran out in 15 minutes, and they had to shut down. So there is demand in some places, as you pointed out.
No, it's funny to see supply-demand. This happened in Nevada as well, where they opened up the floodgates. People want the product, and they can't support it. There's a huge demand for this.
A few weeks ago, I did a story on the opening of recreational sales in the state of Illinois and the crush for business. And I met a gentleman who was here on Sanibel on vacation, and he talked about being in the line, waiting almost 4 to 6 hours to get into the dispensary and then waiting to get product. And he lived within about 2 hours of the dispensary, but he talked about people coming across the border, over the river on bridges, walking to go and spending that much time. Just an overwhelming demand. So, Ellis, there are some places where it's going great guns, but there are other places that it's begun to slow down. The demand issue is very important. Here in Florida, we have a dispensary that has 25 storefronts, and they were considering putting in a delivery service to meet the demand. And they ultimately decided to add 25 more stores to their network, making them the largest dispensary operator in Florida, rather than going to a delivery service. I read a story recently that California, which is a more mature market, still needs somewhere in the neighborhood of 7,000 dispensaries. There are many cities and counties that have no dispensaries in them at all. We're speaking with Ellis Smith, the president and founder of American Cannabis Company, about the cannabis industry and which is the best business to get in. Let's move on to another question, Ellis. How does one decide where we should put a dispensary?
Sometimes you're very limited depending on where you are. Some towns and cities will zone you in very limited areas. And so that's one thing to be concerned about, that you may not always get that storefront right on Main Street that you want. They may put you in an industrial area on the end of town. It really varies. Once you can figure out where that green area is to operate, then ideally you want to find something next to major roads, major businesses. It's just like any other retail business, location, location, location. I can't express that enough. So it's super important to think about that. Traffic counts. All of those things play into the equation to ensure that you can run a sustainable business model. You know, I'm looking at a business right now in Oklahoma that's for sale. And this guy is in a town of 275 people, but he's on a major highway that sees over 15,000 cars a day. And so he's actually running a pretty sustainable little business model, considering that town has 275 people or whatever it is. So understanding location and your traffic counts and the ability to target those folks, it's super important to pay attention to those details.
Ellis, I understand that California passed a billboard law that allows dispensaries to advertise on billboards their name and their products and their services, but they're restrictive. They have to be within so many miles of the dispensary. There's certain images they can't use. So it's there, but it's pretty restrictive.
And even here in every state you go into, even cities versus the state will dictate the signage you can put up too. And so these are the things you need to pay attention to. They may only give you a certain height that your signage can be, a certain size your signage can be. Some states won't allow any type of marijuana leaf to be shown whatsoever, no type of name with cannabis or marijuana or anything in it. So there's a lot of different hoops to jump through depending on the state that you're in or the city to limit what your marketing and your branding can look like. So just be aware of these things. There will be some red tape to get through.
One of the things that's unique about our advertising and promotion model is that because we're not subject to the regulations of the FCC, we can offer radio advertising for dispensaries and for product providers, even down to the local neighborhood. So we're really excited about expanding that piece. But let's move on. So let me ask you about the business. What's happening? We saw that stock prices dropped by 60%. It appears that the raw product is stabilizing in price, but a lot of people have filed for bankruptcy. And is the wave over, or is there something else going to happen?
Well, there's a great article that came out I just read in Cannabis Business Executive about really, just how the public markets are looking at the industry and investors as a whole are looking at our industry. Sure, there's a bunch of investment put into the industry. Now these guys are wanting an ROI. They're wanting to see some type of return on this money now. And so they're turning to the operators who are making money, and the people who aren't are going to be really leaning on some of the service companies like myself to come in and help clean their books up, help get their production back on point, help get their margins, where it needs to be to function. And so we're going to see, quite a bit of this shift next year because investors are going to be really putting their thumb on these folks that took their money to ensure they get it back. And so we're going to see folks that have a lot of red numbers this year as they took on loads they could handle. Next year, I think you'll see some of that turn around and start to see some of these investors put the pressure on. The industry's going to switch for positive with more production, more growth. It's expanding year after year. Even the Colorado market, we're over a $1.3 billion market, and we're still growing year after year. I don't know how. I'm wondering when that ceiling will hit, but we haven't hit it yet. And so just more growth, more sustainability with companies that know how to run their businesses. We'll see quite a bit of drop-off from folks that are distressed and don't know how to run their business. I'm constantly looking at deal flow right now to make acquisitions on these businesses that are just gasping for air. They are running out of money, and they don't know how to operate. And so we're seeing quite a bit of that, too.
Ellis, are you suggesting that the cost of the businesses is such that many of the smaller operators really don't know what it's really costing them, and as the things have turned down, in order for them to continue to survive, they have to put some of their own money back into the business because the business can't sustain itself?
That's correct. So that's exactly what we're seeing. People are needing help to get a better margin. They don't know their margin.
So what is it they're not doing? This is important. We've got people that are struggling in a business who they thought they were going to get rich, and now they're finding they're not, or may not doing it now. What are they doing? With your experience in the business, what are the mistakes that you can help people who are thinking about getting into the business that are being made today, that if they don't make them, they have a much greater chance of success?
The number one mistake we see being made is keeping their books in line and having an accounting company to help them and guide them to understand their margins. The taxes is the biggest thing, not knowing 280E. And this is where we're seeing folks not having the analytics, the metrics to understand how to run their business day to day. They're not getting the information they need like any business should have. The folks that are successful, that's why they are, because they have their stuff in order. Bottom line.
If we look at the transaction where an individual gets his or her license from the state to operate, and perhaps something from the city or the county, but once he owns it, he owns it. He can turn around and sell it to a person or persons that would be qualified by the state, but doesn't need to get the state's permission to sell the business.
As long as the person that's making the purchase qualifies, there's no reason why the state should be able to interfere with that. But they have to qualify as far as just all the backgrounds, the financial background check, all these different components. But after that, as long as you can pass those specific credentials, these licenses can change hands over and over and over if you want to do that, and new buyers can come in and take them over. So market to market, it varies. Colorado, we're seeing businesses are selling for one-time revenue. Mm-hmm. In Nevada, we're seeing cultivation facilities and extraction businesses being sold for about 2.5 to 3 times revenue, and we're seeing the dispensary selling for about 8 to 10 times revenue in places like Nevada. Massachusetts, I'm seeing businesses being sold are about 1.5 times revenue, 2 times revenue. And so every market is a little bit different depending on the maturity and kind of where you are. So we're seeing kind of a little bit of difference all over. But in Colorado, we're seeing the best pricing for resale at 1 times revenue for people who are to purchase.
Well, Ellis Smith has been a terrific guest in our conversation today. He has given us a great deal of information to think about getting into this level up the ladder of the cannabis business. We'll be right back. This is Dan Perkins, host of America's Cannabis Conversation, and I want to hear from you. Send me an email. Tell me what you like about our show, what you don't like about our show, what kind of guests you'd like to hear from, and is there subjects that are important to you that we're not discussing? Let us know. Go to W420radionetwork.com and send us an email. Thanks for listening.
You're listening to America's Cannabis Conversation on the W420 Radio Network.
Well, much is changing in the cannabis world, locally, nationally, and globally. And we're joined now by Brent Johnson, the CEO of the Hoban Law Group, the leading global law firm focusing exclusively on the cannabis industry. And Brent, I know you're based in Colorado, where it was the first state to make recreational marijuana legal. And in California, 2 years ago, joined the party, if you will. But it's an ever-changing terrain and domain, isn't it?
Definitely. I mean, obviously, Colorado was one of the leaders in the space. California's trying to evolve. It's had its challenges, but I mean, there's obviously over 30 states now that have it legal, either medical and or rec. Mm-hmm. We're headquartered in Denver, but we have about 50 attorneys. We cover about 28 states. We're also in Latin America and start to expand in Europe. So yeah, we have attorneys on the ground in all these states, and each state has its own issues, and it's evolving in its own way. One thing that's unique about us is we're also heavily focused on hemp. And obviously now that hemp is federally legal, we're in a great position to advise clients, not just on the marijuana, but also on the hemp side.
Yeah, and many people believe that with hemp becoming legal nationally, it may be a prelude to the legalization of cannabis. And what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's still going to be a while. The hemp's a much easier sell because it doesn't get you high. Right, and it also has arguably 30,000 plus industrial uses. I mean, from bottles to batteries to houses to animal beds to feed, and so it's much easier to make that sell. Obviously, that's why it's probably passed at the federal level. And now we have states adopting their plans under the new USDA rules, and so that's definitely much easier to sell. I mean, there's still going to be challenges on the marijuana side. We don't expect full legalization really anytime soon. Obviously, with the election coming up, we'll kind of see how that all plays out. But we're at this point almost half hemp and half marijuana, and we expect that to grow in favor of hemp.
Oh, really? Well, the SAFE Banking Act that passed the House of Representatives is now before the U.S. Senate, which would enable cannabis growers to sell their products interstate, to use normal banking means like any other business. That potentially could be a landmark decision.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, banking is one of the issues, certainly on the marijuana side. A lot of folks have trouble finding banking. They have issues with banks that decide to get out of the space and close accounts down. Also, it is a political issue. McConnell was key in getting the federal legislation passed on the hemp side. He's not a marijuana fan, and so we think he's going to hesitate on trying to push that through the Senate. But who knows in the political environment that we're in now?
Right. And what about Colorado in terms of its regulation and its taxation and the like? Because California has been mired in bureaucracy and high taxes, and 80% of the $3 billion annual market is black market.
Yeah, California's definitely having its struggles, right? With the various regulatory bodies. I think they're really just trying to figure out how to get all their ducks in a row. It's kind of interesting. I was just having this conversation the other day with some colleagues. Colorado obviously started a certain way, as did Washington, for example. California kind of did its own thing. I mean, they looked at what other states had done in the past, but they kind of thought they, had a different way to do it. And I think they're realizing that there's a lot of challenges and a lot of issues, and it's having a significant effect on the market.
Yeah, adversely, because, as we say, 4/5 of the weed sold in California is not through a dispensary. So the projected $1 billion a year in revenue from legal marijuana is woefully short of that. Now, in Colorado, by contrast, how does that differ?
Yeah, I mean, Colorado is, it's a mature market, right? The regulations, I mean, there's still obviously changes. We just recently had a number of changes in Colorado to make it more easy for investors to come into those businesses. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely a strong legal market in Colorado, and most folks are buying their weed through dispensaries. I mean, I'm sure there's still a black market, but in Colorado, it's a whole different story than it is in California.
Yeah, well, can you elaborate on that, please? I mean, in terms of taxes, and like in California, 70% of municipalities are banning dispensaries and cultivation. So you've got limited access to product, and you've got massive taxes, which are encumbrances for businesses. Is it a more favorable business climate in Colorado for the cannabis cultivator, dispensary, grower, and the like?
Sure. Yes, the answer is yes for sure. Also at the federal level, there's still issues around 280E. Those hit businesses whether you're in Colorado or California. But it's definitely a more marijuana-friendly environment. It's obviously at the state level, it's legal, and then each city and municipality can decide if they want to have it legal or not, and if they do, what parts. And so we have some municipalities that only have medical, some that have medical and rec, some that don't allow it at all. But in general, Colorado as a state is certainly marijuana business friendly.
Is it less politically charged in Colorado than it appears to be in California?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, we're over the hump, and with the governor that we have now, he's pro cannabis, and so for us, I mean, there's still various interest groups, and so when regulations need to be changed or updated, there's always debate. But having a governor that's marijuana friendly, and having a population that's becoming more educated on cannabis and understanding and what it can do, and also obviously there's huge tax benefits to the state.
Yeah, and the money that the states are garnering is going a long way to break some of those psychological barriers of resistance, one would imagine.
Yeah, for sure, right? And when people see that money's flowing to schools and it's helping with their kids and better education and all that, it's certainly helpful. The thing that I find interesting and now that CBD is around, I think when you talk about marijuana, there's a lot of folks that still don't quite get it or are opposed to it. And now that we have hemp-derived CBD products that are kind of main stage, we have a lot of folks that would never touch marijuana, but they're like, what's this hemp CBD thing? And so it's almost like they're easing in on the hemp-derived CBD side, which also helps get them educated and to understand the marijuana side more. Yeah,
breaking down some barriers, too. Now, you mentioned that your law firm, the largest cannabis firm with the focus on cannabis. What about in Latin America? I don't know if you speak collectively. I know Colombia has legalized, and other nations as well. Ecuador.
Colombia, Ecuador as well. We actually have attorneys in Colombia and Ecuador, in Mexico, in Uruguay, and we're soon to have folks in Peru and Brazil. We see huge opportunity in Latin America. I mean, obviously, each country has its own issues with regard to how they're regulating it. Latin America in general is they're against marijuana. And so what they're really trying to do is, again, it's an education component, but also hemp is a big deal. I was just down in Ecuador in December, and I met with two of the key cannabis attorneys in Ecuador, and they're literally helping the government understand medicinal marijuana, but even more so hemp. And so they're about to pass the equivalent of the USDA regs for the cultivation of hemp. So they're making that progress, but now they don't know what to do. Where do you get the seeds? How do you grow it? How do you process it? But there's definitely a lot of exciting things happening in Latin America.
Yeah, now with entrepreneurs struggling here in California because of the aforementioned taxes and encumbrances on the bureaucracy, how is it more favorable for investors to look to Latin America or to Colorado or to Canada? They've struggled too, even with the legalization.
Sure. It's almost like it's kind of interesting because I think in California there's definitely struggles, right? But the thing is, there's all these other states that are bringing programs up, whether it's on the marijuana side or on the hemp side, and so there's still huge opportunities in the U.S. And so just because maybe California is struggling, It doesn't mean you need to run to Latin America or Canada. I mean, Canada has its own issues. Capital's dried up there as well. There's a lot of producers. Margins are getting squeezed. Looking at states in the U.S. that are in the earlier stages of adopting either marijuana and/or hemp. There's still huge opportunities to invest. Look at Colorado, right? The folks that came in early in Colorado did it right. They've done well, and so there's still tons of states where there's opportunity.
And how about the European experience?
Same, Europe's a whole different thing, right? The way they treat certainly medical cannabis, and there are a lot of folks that are looking to leverage the European market because medicine's like a pharma drug over there, right? It's health insurance pays for it, where it's legal, and so it's a lot different regulatory scheme and mindset than here in the U.S. So yeah, there's certainly opportunities in Europe.
Mm-hmm. Are there strong lobby groups in the countries we just mentioned and here in California and elsewhere that are working to stem the tide or change the tide of the negative perception of cannabis, and whether it be banking or legalization nationally or the like?
Yeah, it's a huge education component, right? And so, there are significant lobbying groups that are really, if nothing else, trying to educate legislators just to get them to understand, even on the marijuana side, this is what it's about. Yeah, people use it to have fun, but also there's arguably huge medical benefits. A lot of folks are getting medical relief from medical marijuana. But even on the hemp side, just getting people to understand hemp. California CBD is a challenge right now, but they're working on that. Mm-hmm. So whether it's California or all these other states, there's definitely folks that are pushing to get legislators to really understand the plant, what it's about, and what it can do.
Now, do you work more on the corporate and state and national level, or do you also work to help expunge the drug convictions of marijuana offenders who are now in prison?
We're obviously the leading global cannabis law firm, which by that I mean both marijuana and hemp. But we're a full service business law firm. So we do corporate securities, M&A, private equities, intellectual property, tax. We're not a criminal defense firm. Mm-hmm. We don't deal with in terms of criminal record expungements. We're definitely more of a corporate business focused law firm.
Mm-hmm. And Michigan, Illinois have just recently legalized recreational adult use for marijuana. New Jersey and New York could be on the horizon soon. Do you see this burgeoning nationwide, or is it still hit or miss?
There's certainly a momentum, right? As they say, the train's left the station, and every year we get a handful of states that come on board, and so it'll take time. But once we get a critical mass, then I think they'll start feeling it at the federal level and work to hopefully legalize it at that level.
Yeah, and I would think that if there is a national legalization of marijuana in the U.S., the prospects for international growth with trade of the best cannabis in the world from California and the like, that the financial impetus could drive that in a stronger way than it has to this point. One would think, looking at the global reach.
Right. Yeah, 100%. Right, and certainly there's the marijuana side, and so if it becomes federally legal in the U.S., it certainly opens up huge doors. But then, even more importantly, and what we focus on, we certainly focus on marijuana, but the hemp opportunities, right? We're seeing CBD as a huge opportunity. Lots of our clients are they want to manufacture CBD products and ship them overseas, so we work through a lot of import-export issues. But people don't realize that there's again arguably 30,000 other uses for hemp, and so the opportunity to manufacture those products. Grow hemp plants that are made to turn into shirts or bottles or houses or car doors, and all the technology that has to be developed along with that. Those are huge opportunities. It almost dwarfs. It certainly dwarfs marijuana.
Right.
And so we're all in on hemp, and even beyond just CBD, because there's so much more to do with that plant.
Well, hemp could be the game changer that could carry cannabis with it. If we want to contact you, or our listeners want to know more about your law firm, if they may have a need for your services?
Yeah, absolutely. You can reach out to me. Again, it's Brent Johnson, CEO of Hoban Law Group. My email is brent@hoban.law, BRENT@Hoban, HOBAN.law, LAW. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us. Rich Walkoff on the W420 Radio Network.
America's newest and fastest growing cannabis-focused radio network is expanding across the country and looking to add to our sales and marketing team. America's Cannabis Conversation offers listeners insight and information on the exploding world of cannabis. It also gives advertisers the opportunity to reach a hyper-targeted audience, literally neighborhood by neighborhood, in markets all across the country. We're looking for a few motivated individuals that want to essentially run their own local business in markets like Boston, Las Vegas, Reno, Orlando, and more. To learn more about this exciting opportunity or to apply, visit americascannabisconversation.com.
This is Dan Perkins, and we're about halfway through today's conversation. I hope you have found the people interesting and helpful. In case you didn't hear all of the interviews in today's conversation, you can go to W420radionetwork.com after 5:20 p.m. to listen to this show. If you missed any of our previous shows, or you want to hear a particular show again, you can go to the archives and download a missed show anytime that's convenient for you. Our goal is to bring a high-quality program that is both entertaining and informative. For those of you who are in the industry, we hope we can continue to be your voice, telling the people of America the benefits of this amazing all-natural product. We have been surprised at the willingness of important people to come into this new program and talk about the challenges and opportunities in the cannabis industry. It's hard to believe that it's been 23 years since cannabis was made legal in California. I think the next 23 years might be even more exciting than the first 23. One more thing before we get back to the conversation. Should you have a question or a comment, please contact us at contact@W420radionetwork.com. That's contact@W420radionetwork.com. And now, back to the conversation. Welcome back to the conversation, and joining us today for another visit is Alex Therrien, who's a Senior Solutions Specialist at Lightspeed-HQ. And he's going to talk to us today about something different than just operating software. Welcome to the conversation, Alex.
Oh, thanks for having me again, Dan. It's my pleasure.
So let's talk about entry-level services that might be available from Lightspeed and that can be expanded as the business grows. Where is the entry point for somebody starting a brand new dispensary to begin to work with Lightspeed?
Yeah, I think the entry point for Lightspeed in general sticks around if once you start realizing that the problems of going sort of like the natural problems of going into business. How do I track this inventory? I'm starting to get a lot of customers. I'm starting to get a lot of sales. When you start to hit that point, that's usually where we come in with our offering. You have a lot of first-time artist vendors. They want to try something out. We might be a little bit overkill for their needs, although we'd still be able to do them. But that's usually when someone starts to get a brick-and-mortar store, needs to start tracking inventory and customers. I would say we are a perfect fit for them, whether they have 1, 2, 4, 10 locations. We're the right type of partner for that, specifically around that sphere.
I'm thinking about starting a business, and I get it started, and it's doing really well, and I'm thinking about maybe I should add a second store and expand my business, maybe more. Does your software and systems help me as my business grows and expands? If I add that second store, do I have to have a whole new system, or is there a way for me to connect the two stores together under Lightspeed?
No, they're all like I don't want to say it's as easy as flicking a switch, but it's almost as easy as that. We don't really see it as a store level. We see things as a business, right? And your business could be one store, it could be online, it could be 100 stores. So for us, we always take the approach that people are going to use our software, grow their business, and eventually run into these needs, so we want to be prepared for them. So in your exact scenario, you give me a call and I add another location, and your customer base, inventory base, everything is already there. And you can now start transferring and reporting in 2 locations.
You've talked about bricks and mortar and you've talked about online, but suppose I want to do both. Can I work with Lightspeed in doing that too?
No. Well, I mean, nowadays we almost see them both as the same. I mean, it's almost whether, no matter what your online presence is, it's getting harder and harder to find businesses that are purely brick and mortar and don't have something there. But, it happens. You start a business, you want to go brick and mortar first. You find you have a good product for your community, and you want to expand that to a larger community or to the world. Well, it seems like a pretty daunting task. So whatever you can do to, minimize the amount of time and, the headaches, good. And if all that information is already ready to go, well, why not just, again, be able to flick a switch? Now, obviously, I want to put a huge disclaimer here. I don't say that opening an e-com business is flicking a switch. You have to give it a lot of thought and obviously work with the right people. But, you can minimize a lot of those issues by the online aspect of our business.
In your last appearance, we talked about the friend of mine who has multiple brick-and-mortar dispensaries in Northern California, and he has successfully integrated his point-of-sale software into his internet, and by capturing, whether it's brick-and-mortar or internet, the cell phone numbers, he's able to market to both customer bases special offers from his dispensaries.
That's totally true. I was about to say they're actually the same. It's the very same customer database. I mean, obviously online you can capture a little bit more because, well, I need to know where you live if I want to ship something to you. But it's the same thing, right? I can have a what we call an omni-channel campaign, right? I can reach out to my online people to try to get them interested about my store or other offers and vice versa. So it's for us, we really do see that as something called omni-channel. And in the case of the example you had, a different channel was open, which was an engagement channel, right? If I have these products, let me put them up online, right? We're just trying to minimize the amount of work that goes into, just running a business effectively. It's a lot of work. So whatever we can do to minimize, definitely do that.
One of the challenges confronting entrepreneurs was expressed by our resident cannabis serial entrepreneur who talks about launching businesses both in bricks and mortar and over the internet. And one of the challenges over the internet is that in many cases, many states, you have to physically deliver a prescription to a dispensary in order to get your product. Tough to do with a dispensary that's only on the internet. But perhaps if we get federal regulation, we may be in a position to do that. But right now, that's an impediment to expansion and being in a profitable internet business.
That's a bigger question at large, right? What the future of retail is, and I mean, we firmly believe here at Lightspeed that the future of retail is in the hands of it's in the hands of partners, right? Like partners like us and partnerships that we developed with retailers. You're 100%, and you say like gone are the days of just something's working for me here. Let me just go ahead and open 100 stores. Well, how are you going to compete against online? I think people are going to start to adapt a little bit the retail experience, right? We won't keep it within the cannabis space, right? I might be able to order online. I might be able to get better deals online, but I might still want to have that interaction. And if I can, go speak to a bud tender, just even if it's just in a consulting way, then maybe I'll appreciate that. And it might just mean that as a business that used to be 90% in store and 10% online is now shifting to the opposite. Well, you just get a smaller retail space, you turn it into more of a consulting thing, and you can drive people towards online. It's a different thing, and we'll see what the future has for us. I think they're synergistic. If they compete against each other, online's going to win every time, and I think we know why, right? Less overhead, but no, I think they're symbiotic. I think you can definitely complement both, and I don't think people are ever going to go away from wanting to speak to someone. Personally, maybe I prefer to do something online on my own, but there's always those people that want to have someone help guide them through that. So I think it's just a different future, not one that's going to go away, just a slightly different realities.
We're speaking to Alex Kerrigan, who is the Strategic Solutions Manager for Lightspeed. And Alex, I might disagree with you just a little bit. As somebody who's interested in retail, I look at the quarterly reports and I see how earnings are missing expectations. I see where companies like Macy's and others are announcing significant store closures, switching their businesses to online. I'm wondering whether or not the brick and mortar can actually survive in this environment longer term. So what's the prospects of brick and mortar do you think, in the cannabis industry?
Right. Yeah, and I mean, to your comment there, I think the big box stores are definitely, but a potential to be a dinosaur in the future. And quite frankly, I think it's because they compete on one thing and one thing only, which is the price, right? And you're going to have a hard time with that. But those that are coming in to fill it, because the retailer, if I look at like the U.S. Census, like the retail market, while the big box stores are closing, the retailers themselves are still growing by 3%, which means that there's an independent, there's a strong independent force of people who want to go into retail, jump feet first into it. And of course now they have companies like Amazon, to compete against there, or to gain inspiration from, or companies like Wayfair. So it's like, how do they compete? Well, they need to have the right tools, because clearly they believe that there's a need, within their community or community at large. So at Lightspeed, we want to try to equip people with not just the point-of-sale system, but, if you believe that you're better off with an iPad walking around the store, not having a central cache, then yeah, we can do that because we're cloud-based. You need to do some data analytics beyond just running reports. We have a data platform that can help you out with that. Same for the loyalty. So what your example with your buddy at the dispensary, that can also be a reality. So it's kind of going back to it. You're totally correct. Retail is not dying. Retail is shifting, and I think independents are going to take a bigger space in the future. Hey, we have their tools now, and independents benefit from the same tools that Macy's had 10, 15 years ago.
We have about 2 minutes left, so I have one more question. When we look at Lightspeed and we talk about the services and all the things that you can do, are we actually physically buying the hardware and software, or is it a different business model?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're a SaaS-based company. So we work off of a monthly subscription. So you don't have to you don't have to fork up a big upfront expenditure. Cash flow is important. Get that monthly subscription for the vast majority of needs. I mean, it depends if you're listening to me in the U.S. or Canada here, but call it about $100 a month for to start your business, to get a point of sale system. And it's a monthly thing. So it's like, we're there to work with you, and with that comes support. And in a partnership, let me just tell you that the most important thing is support and speaking to people who understand you, right, and kind of like can help you quickly. So with all that, you get point-of-sale software. Obviously, we can help you out with the hardware, whether it's iPads or whatever you need. But we're not just on iPads. We are a cloud-based, so we're platform agnostic. You want to use a computer, go for it. But most importantly, you'll have a number that you can call 24/7. Speak to someone who can who understand and will try to resolve your situation within minutes. And that's really where me, coming from Strategic Solutions, I'm most proud of, and where I always point people towards our strongest sentiment of partnership is the support we give our customers.
Well, Alex, your product seems to be extremely affordable. Do you sell hardware or just rent the software?
It's totally a customer choice. We sell it. We sell it through a partner. We oftentimes get people that tell us, hey, I can get it for cheaper there, or through someone I know. It's like, fantastic, go for it. It's if it's one less thing you have to spend on when opening a business, by all means. But we can sell you everything that you need. We can't lease it, but we'll sell it to you. It'll be yours. We've
been speaking to Alice Therrien, who is the Strategic Solutions Manager for Lightspeed HQ on products and services for his company. If you missed part of this conversation with Alex, you can go to W420radionetwork.com and download this show in the archive section, or any other show that tickles your fancy by going into the archive section and looking at the titles. Alex, thanks for joining us today on America's Cannabis Conversation.
That was my pleasure, Dan.
You're listening to America's Cannabis Conversation on the W420 Radio Network. Every week on the W420 Radio Network, America's Cannabis Conversation brings you information and insight into the exciting and ever-changing world of cannabis. Hear from our host Dan Perkins as he highlights the week's news, checks in with Morgan Fox from the National Cannabis Industry Association, and discusses medical benefits during our Cannabis Doctor On Call feature. You'll also hear regular contributions from cannabis correspondents Rich Walcott and Chase Roberts. America's talking about America's Cannabis Conversation. Check out the archive of past shows at americascannabisconversation.com.
This is Dan Perkins, your host of America's Cannabis Conversation, with breaking news. I wanted to alert you to make sure that you listen to the show next week when we will be announcing a groundbreaking product and service for anybody related to the cannabis industry that has had difficulty in securing a lasting banking relationship. We have heard of many examples where dispensaries or other parts of the industry have secured a banking relationship only for you to get a phone call within a few months telling you that they can no longer take your business and you have to clear your accounts in 30 to 45 days. You have to start over trying to find a new banking relationship. We're going to help all facets of the cannabis industry that has had difficulty in getting and maintaining a banking relationships. All facets of the cannabis industry, whether growers, dispensaries, processors, any business that deals with any part of the cannabis industry has a problem with banking problems. Under our new program, you will be able to hire a payroll service to pay your employees. You'll be able to provide your employees with retirement accounts, medical insurance, and workman's compensation. We will provide you with the ability for your customers to pay for their transactions with a secure PIN debit or credit card. And we'll be able to provide your dispensary a cashless ATM right on your checkout counter. If you have reached the point that you are concerned about the amount of cash you have on hand, we invite you to come and listen to our show and learn how we can help you take some of the risk out of your cash and protect your investment. I invite you to join us next Saturday at 4:20 p.m. for the next edition of America's Cannabis Conversation and learn how we can help you preserve and protect your cash. This has been Dan Perkins.
This is Chase Roberts reporting for W420. Today I am speaking with
Janice Mackey of the California Department of Fish and Wildlife
and
Rebecca Ferre with the California Department of Food and Agriculture.
So I'm interested to find out, what is the state of California doing to be actively involved in the cannabis industry?
Well, at Fish and Wildlife, I can say that we're putting on permitting workshops in conjunction with CDFA and the state water boards. We're going out to communities, Humboldt, Mendocino, Nevada County, and we're hosting online workshops, among other places that we are going. And we're going out hosting permitting workshops, and you can hear from state agencies. It's partially, the workshops are half open house and half presentations, so we can talk about the permitting, licensing, regulatory requirements. And then we also have open house to ask project questions. So if you are in the middle of submitting a lake and stream bed alteration agreement to Fish and Wildlife for your cultivation activities and you want to know the status of it, that would be a good time to ask staff about it.
Do you feel like cultivators are actively trying to find out this information, or did you present it first? Did the state present it first to make sure everyone is up to snuff as far as requirements go? Or is there confusion in the industry for cultivators and what they need to be doing as far as proper practices?
These cultivation workshops have been going on for years, and we cannot get the word out fast enough. 2 to 3 years ago, they were holding cultivation workshops, and there were hundreds of people attending them. And while the numbers have slowed down, people are still finding that information very useful. Besides the State Water Board, Fish and Wildlife, permitting, there's also other regulatory requirements, with the Franchise Tax Board, Employment Development Department, Cal OSHA, if you have employees. So it's just good one-stop shopping to get information depending on what type of grow you have or type of circumstances you're in. It's just good to get information. And sometimes people need to hear it 2 or 3 times. So we're also offering the workshops online. If they don't want to come in person to a workshop, you can always check the CDFA website, the Fish and Wildlife cannabis page, or the State Water Board's cannabis page for upcoming workshops.
And how are you guys funded? Are you through state grants, or is this through the government, state of California, in the budget?
The California Department of Fish and Wildlife's cannabis program is funded through the cannabis tax. So that is funded through the cannabis tax, and for our lake and stream bed alteration agreements, fees that we receive per permits go back into that program as well. So, but we do a huge amount of outreach. Anybody with questions for Fish and Wildlife, you can email us at askcannabis@wildlife.ca.gov. You can contact us on social media. You can come to a workshop. You can contact me, the Public Information Officer. My phone number is 916-207-7891. I am happy to facilitate calls, and I want to hear from cultivators. As a matter of fact, this year we're working on our second annual Wildlife Tips for Cultivators. And this is a press release letting cultivators know what they can do to what cultivators can do to have environmentally friendly practices with their grow. Instead of using rodenticides, use owl boxes. Instead of pesticides, use fat boxes. This year, we want to hear from cultivators. We want real-life examples of what people are doing in the field. If you have a suggestion that's a great environmentally friendly tip, I would love to hear from you. You can email me at askcannabis@wildlife.ca.gov. And please send us your tips. We're going to be issuing a press release in early May.
Okay, I'd also like to ask you, what are the major misconceptions that you find are out there? Is there any information you would like to get out to listeners about erroneous information, confusion?
Some misinformation in the marketplace that permitting with Fish and Wildlife costs hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's really not the case. Each circumstance is different, and that permitting, while it's a change for some, coming into the regulatory process, the costs are actually, our average cost for a lake and stream bed agreement is $600. So there's a lot of misconceptions. And another one is that you need a consultant to get through the permitting process. Once again, there are, each circumstance is different. As a matter of fact, we just put together a Mythbuster fact sheet that talks about the top 5 myths of permitting.
That's amazing, by the way. Much needed.
And we put it out at Emerald Cup. We had it on our table. People were picking it up. We'll be posting it soon online. We're making some small tweaks, and we'll be posting a Mythbuster once a month on our Instagram page. So follow it.
That is amazing. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking part in America's Cannabis Conversation. To hear this show in its entirety or to hear any of our archive shows, log on to americascannabisconversation.com and tune in next Saturday at 4:20 p.m. for the next installment of America's Cannabis Conversation.
This is Dan Perkins, and thank you for joining the conversation. We hope you enjoyed the conversation today and invite you to join us next week. By the way, you can go to our website, www.americascannabisconversation, and download previous shows, but also on the website, you'll be able to see who our guests are going to be next week. So go to the website, americascannabisconversation.com, download shows, and look who's going to be on next week. This is Dan Perkins, and thanks for joining the conversation. America's Cannabis Conversation.